Just waiting for it to say. Hey everybody, welcome to Increasing Your Certainty in Practice with Dr. David Fletcher, being hosted by the Pediatrics Summit, September 25th and 26th this year in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. David Fletcher, the president, owner of the Chiropractic Leadership Alliance, has helped hundreds of people in practice, ran several practices, is a wealth of knowledge. Is here to talk about certainty in running a pediatric practice and a family practice, and how you run your practice and keeping what you do completely 100%. I'm kind of cutting out. I don't know if you guys can hear me. The feed, Dr. Fletcher, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're gonna work with what we've got here, Caleb. It's in and out, but hopefully when they hear me, it won't be so bad.
All right, awesome. Well, Dr. David Fletcher, how are you doing today?
Having a great start. Well, actually, I finished my day. We saw lots and lots of people. One of the great things about the life I get to lead is that I get to lead a fantastic, rather global company that embraces the principles of chiropractic. And 2 or 3 times a week, I put on my my other hat, which I think is really my true hat, and I get to adjust over the tables. So it's a pretty exciting life I get to live. Work with what we've got here, Caleb. It's in and out, but hopefully when they hear me, it won't be so bad.
All right, awesome. Well, Dr. David, Fletcher, how are you doing?
Having a great start. Well, actually, I finished my day. We saw lots and lots of people.
I'm getting
One of the great things about the life I get to
a repeat of what we just said.
That's awkward.
I'm having like 3 people yelling in my earpiece here.
Okay, that's not good.
I don't know how to fix this. Well, Dr. Fletcher, while I'm trying to stand by 1 second, everybody, try to fix this. All right, I think I fixed it.
Beautiful.
Can you still hear me,
I can, if that's of help.
All right, here we go. Logging, fixing it. All right, I had a couple of, I was actually watching it somehow at the same time as I was presenting, so it had about a 15, 20-second lag and was repeating everything we said.
Good.
So Dr. Fletcher, what is it that we're here to talk about today about increasing our certainty in practice?
Well, I think that the message. Are we okay now?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I think that the message that resonates mostly with.
Hold on. Sorry, we lost you for a second.
How's that?
All right, yes. Sorry about these technical difficulties, guys, but I think we are ready to get started. So, as you were saying, Dr. Fletcher.
Well, I think that the message really is one that we all need to keep focused on, and that's the principle of certainty. There's a saying that I sort of came up with that I hope has resonance with the folks on the call today, and that is that taking it from the etheric, which is the principles of chiropractic and how they operate in daily life and human life, is that we actually make a business out of it and we take it to the public. And so in a very simple way, although we won't get focused on that today, you get paid to the level at which you operate with certainty. And it then becomes paramount to look at what drives the message through you, which ultimately then drives the message into your community. And we're on a program today that's sort of headline called the Pediatric Summit. And in truth, what we're really looking at is how we can relate to the entire family, but have a special relationship in the pediatric world. And I thought what I do to describe that is build that certainty, if you will, over the next few minutes or whatever time we have, and give you some insights into how I have spent a number of my years in practice, but also in a leadership role that I have both on the lecture circuit, but a leadership role in the company that I run. And I thought it might be interesting for the group that's listening in to really have some perspective as to how big the vision and the message can be in your community. Look, the realities that are facing the 21st century chiropractor are really not that complex. They actually have been built in since we started building this thing called chiropractic practice. They're pretty much enduring difficulties, enduring opportunities that we see that are similar from where they were 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. The truth is that if you can figure out what a chiropractor is, you're going to make a handsome impact in your community. And what I mean by that is that chiropractic is unparalleled. You don't have to fall back to becoming a back care therapist. At some level, when you start deciding how you want to present yourself, and we call these the different versions of chiropractic, you're going to find that there's a sweet spot in there for you. If you take the very first step and start to recognize that the supremacy of the nervous system drives the game, whether it be the game of chiropractic or whether it be the game of human health, and you have the keys to that kingdom in something called the chiropractic adjustment, and you start to honor the notion that you can change people's lives, not just their spines, by the power of the adjustment you're delivering, then all of a sudden that sweet spot that we're talking about becomes the focus of your entire practice. And so when we really put this together with our clients and in my practice as a demonstration place, what we recognize is that it's not that hard. The enduring problems, back in the good old days, were the notion between straights and mixers. Back in those days, the straights had it that there was one cause, one cure, one correction, and that was that there was a bone out pinching nerve causing problem. And the mixers, where it could be described at times of being anything south of Atlas, but the mixers were the ones who really took it and mixed the message up, whether it be by confusing it with physiotherapy or confusing it with back care, etc. Well, we don't have to go into these polarized camps these days. We see them all over the place. I mean, for goodness sakes, the message isn't so much about how we present chiropractic as whether chiropractic is unique enough these days to stay away from being a drug-based culture. And that's another, Caleb, that's another time we could speak on that. But the truth is that, one of the proudest moments that I had when I graduated, it was that I'm from Ontario, Canada, was that we were presented with our license that was called the Drugless Practitioner's License. And we fit under the Drugless Practitioners Act. So there's no doubt that when we signed on, we got what we were looking for, which was this development of the human being and the health of the human being by staying away from drugs, and most importantly, engaging the wisdom of the body to do what it was designed to do. That's chiropractic. So to do that, I had to relearn how important it was to have that certainty in the nervous system. And so as soon as we started to take that quantum leap away from spine first to nerve first approach in the chiropractic modeling, in the practice, it was as if something ignited in the business and in the practice. You couldn't keep families away. You couldn't keep pediatrics away. You see, instead of having to align your message with the notion that there was this bone out pinching nerve causing problem, you don't have to move in a pediatric world back to the posture of the child. All of a sudden, we were detecting nerve interference patterns. Well, nerve interference takes you so far, but when we start to look at the subluxation as what we know the subluxation is, it really isn't so much a lesion of the spine that's showing up in the nervous system and the muscles and the joints, but what it is it's a state of discord. It's an entire disordered state where we engage everything from the brain disorders to the functional spinal disorders to the emotional disorders. And we understand very simply that if there is a distortion in the processing of the experience, Fred Barge said it best when he said, the one cause of all discord in human order, the cause of all is the inability of the body and the person to interpret themselves in their environment. Well, if we don't have good afferentation and we have this disafferentation experience and we get cluttered signals coming in, then what's going to happen whether you are, 6 inches long or whether you are associated with, being 6 feet tall and 70 years old, it doesn't matter when or where you are in this human growth and development cycle. What happens is that you are getting garbage in with the potential for garbage out. Now, we just spent a lot of time teaching this weekend with an amazing group of doctors. And these are neurofunctional specialists, if you will, people that have dedicated to the neurobehavioral side of things on the pediatric side. And we brought in Dr. Yannick Pauly, who is this genius of a chiropractor. I mean, a true chiropractor, talks to the subluxation. And we were learning how to do these deep diving assessments, going really deep into looking at what layers of the brain are interfered with in the subluxated state. And as we started to recognize that you could use the scanning technologies to detect where these afferent impulses are being distorted, no longer were we confined to looking at a pediatric practice or a chiropractic practice as this efferentation. In other words, that if we take the safety pin cycle, we realize that there's afferent impulses going into the brain and there's efferent impulses coming down. And most of chiropractic has been focused on the efferent side, which means that we take a look at the outcomes. You know, that there's a distortion in the end organ, or there's distortion in the behavior of the person. But what we understand is that the other side of that wing, the afferent side of that wing, is so critically important. And this is where the joy and the excitement of chiropractic at the next level, at the 21st century level, is that if we can clean up those processors, then we can heal the brains of the little people and the older people and the adults, because when you put good in, you get good out. And that's what we were learning this weekend as we started to recognize the power of chiropractic in brain-based care. Now, I'm bringing that sort of distant message towards you because I want everybody on this message, or when you're watching it, to know that chiropractic has evolved from being this very parochial model of propping and praying, of trying to hope that when we find the subluxation, all else follows. Of course it does. I'm a big and huge believer in where we find the subluxation and we release it and we allow innate to do what it does, then we've got the perfect mix there. But when we add the intelligence of an super qualified doctor and they start to say, yes, now let me refine that, let me take it to the next level, let me help the patient re-engage, there are expectations in this thing called chiropractic that can knock your socks off. Because when you start to change this safety pin cycle, when you start to change your intention that you're really giving healing signals to the brain that can then re-signal back out to the rest of the body, this is where the joy of chiropractic comes alive. This means that when we start talking about adjusting babies, that we're not looking at the colic that is the outcome. We're looking to say when we are subluxated, it means that the growing and developing brain is not going to be able to be capacitized if they're subluxated. We understand that, sure, colic might be the symptom that brings the parent in, just like back pain might be the symptom that brings an adult in, but that the power of the adjustment is to look and say, where is the disturbance so that this entire loop of communication within the body is maximized? And this is what we can do. And if you take the time as a dedicated practitioner and start learning, whether it's at that brain-based level, at that upper cervical level, at that full spine level, at that emotional level, at that dietary level, this is where we are and our greatest. And it you know, on a social comment, it kills me to believe that this message of greatness has been so disturbed that there are people in our profession clamoring to put more drugs into people, when we know that the last thing that this planet needs is another group of people to push drugs. There's enough of that going on. So, you know, I think that if I were you, Caleb, and you know, you're sitting in this position where I am not, meaning I am 35 years into this thing called practice and being a chiropractor, and you are just starting 35 minutes of your clinical experience. I mean, God, I wish I were you. You know, you're at this amazing intersection in time of where chiropractic can, if it plays its cards right, shake off these antiquated perspectives of being something of a back care model, that it can shake off these ideas that it's a one-term pop and pray model. We are neuroscientists looking at the emerging health and development of anything that's attached to that brain, and we have what no one else has, and that is that we have perfected over 120, do the math for me, the opportunity, 120 plus years, the skill of understanding what it's like to these rivulets of energy that are attached to this neurospinal functional array and give an adjustment. Not a manipulation, but an adjustment. So, you know, I got involved in my career modeling, which I think is very similar to what happens to a lot of people. They realize that they want to help people, so they look to the health professions. I realized that, you know, I didn't want to be a dentist, and I didn't really end up wanting to be a medical doctor, although that's what I was programmed for a number of years ago. And I fell into this thing called chiropractic, and when I got there, I was told that it was this elegant form of back care that had something extra. And, you know, call it a problem with my alma mater or whatever else, but it took a lot of unlearning to get to the point of where I can have this conversation with the team. But in that process of unlearning, I've had a chance to rub shoulders with probably the finest doctors on this planet. I'm thankful to call friends of many of the people that you would know as mentors in this profession. And there is one common theme that runs through it, and it is this principle of certainty that we began the conversation with. And this principle of certainty is profound, because whether you're running the colleges, and I know most of the presidents, or whether you're running the business organizations, and I know a tremendous number of the CEOs in this business, myself being one of them, that you start to realize that this is a giving profession, not a taking profession. And the people who are at the apex are waiting for the next wave, are encouraging the next wave to take the reins in the mantle and say, this is a great profession, but it has to be done right this time. And doing it right this time means that we're not going to hold ourselves back because, you know, the people, you know, that we're in some type of a dating service with medicine and science as they see it. Is, of course, when we do testing and we do otherwise, we're evidence-centered and evidence-based. But there is so much rhetoric out there about how people don't see chiropractic being a scientific model. Of course it is. It's based upon some of the greatest principles of health, healing, and the evolution of mankind. This is a powerful model. If people took time to recognize that the principle of subluxation has gone far beyond this etheric principle of the bone out pinching the nerve and causing some discord in the mental impulse. I use the principle of the mental impulse all the time, but in 2015 terms. We talk about neuroplasticity. We talk about reorganizational healing. We talk about the capacity of the body to reintegrate itself into society. We talk about the person behind the subluxation. This is what we're super skilled at. And we do this in hundreds of patients a day in my practice. So this is not something laborious that takes hours to do. What keeps this so pure is the idea that we have the keys to the kingdom, and I'll use that term again, in something called the adjustment. When you can detect the subluxated state in a person, when you can give an adjustment that matters, with that certainty that I was talking about that the leaders of this profession bring, that's when the miracles of building a profession happen. I got involved and met a couple of these remarkable leaders years ago, and you know, Reggie and I used to do a lot of lecturing together. Jim Sigafus and I were always great pals and great friends, and I mention those two because, and Sid as well, is that these people have passed, and they've passed the torch to us. And as they have passed, and it's now my turn, I'm not leaving very quickly, but it's time for me to pass the torch. It's great to see people like Caleb, your group and the youth coming up, not being as confused as we were. And so, you know, there's going to be this necessity for you to get out there and really turn on people, but you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know the different versions. So when we go to teach at the CLA, at the Chiropractic Leadership Alliance, we help people realize that it's okay to have that uniqueness wherever you stand. We recognize that there are basically 5 different versions of chiropractic that you can operate through. We term the first one version 0.0 because it's what's called the symptom and pain management model. And we call it 0.0 because really there's zero sum add going in there. I mean, if you're working in a pain-based model, I promise you that a drug that's going to narcotize your nervous system is even more powerful than whatever you're giving. If you're going to do something to try and help the patient at a pain-based level only, you're in deep competition with people that have bigger howitzers than you do. But thankfully, most people are realizing that that's not the path of chiropractic. Version 1.0 is what we refer to as spinal wellness. And this isn't just about back care. This is about understanding that there is this integrated perspective between the active components of the spine, the passive components of the spine, and the neurological control mechanisms in the spine. But the outcome is really about associating better postures, better living conditions with the spine, and that there is this sense that when you put the spine together, you have a better sense of control of your bodily functions, much like the Merrick chart. That you say, this nervous system is connected more to these organ systems, and the sum of better nervous system, the sum of better organ systems is that you're generally healthy. And I think it's a glorious way to practice. I think it's changed the lives of so many people. Version 2.0 takes it a little further, and we refer to that as Discover Wellness. And this is where the chiropractor takes a dedicated interest in saying, well, if you're subluxated when you walk in and you're adjusted, perhaps there's something we can do to advise you and keep you from subluxating when you leave that part of the world. In other words, our office. And of course, what that means is that we take the responsibility of showing people what subluxates them. And this is where we bring into the conversation the 3 dimensions of stress: the physical dimension, the chemical dimension, and the social, psychological dimension. And it's a great way to practice, and that's called Discover Wellness. There's a 3rd dimension, which we call version 3.0, which really talks about brain-based wellness, and it's what I sort of alluded to earlier. And brain-based wellness is really powerful because it's where we start to say, yes, you could work with the traumatized brain. You can take a look at TBI, you can take a look at the neurobehaviorals, you can take a look at concussion, you can take a look at stroke. But what it really is that you take a look at what the small little company about 4 years ago came out called Lumosity. Caleb, do you remember Lumosity? Have you heard of that? Yes, slightly, right? Well, let me tell you, the story about Lumosity is that it's really just simply a brain train game. And what they did was they said, you know what, we engage neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity means that if you garbage in, garbage out, good in, good out, if we give you 2 simple principles of neuroplasticity, which are called time and repetition, and we do it over and over again, and we're going to give you games to play and whatever else, you're going to start retraining the brain. That's called canalization, which means you're going to build better canalized pathways that are going to associate with better and smoother and better neural efficiency. Caleb, do you know who the original neuroplasticians were in the world? Take a guess. Yeah, they're chiropractors. They were chiropractors. Chiropractors said, come and see me on a consistent basis, even though you don't need the pain management, and we're going to carve a better path through your nervous system, and we're going to keep adjusting you to maximize your potential. And so chiropractic kind of lost that game. By the way, do you know how many unique users there were when we put the principle of when they put the principle of neuroplasticity in? In 1 year, they had 35 million users of Lumosity. 35 million users in 1 year signed up. Not unique visitors, not just click-throughs. We're talking about sign-ups. And in year 2, they had 60 million users of this system. And you know what? They didn't shy away from the term. You know what they offered at the end of it? Neuroplasticity. So brain-based care is cutting edge. And if we get our stuff together within chiropractic, we're going to be showing that when you start to do time and repetition under a glorious principle called neural efficiency and neural reprogramming, then the adjustments take on something that is essential for all 4 generations that you'll see in your practice. The newborns, the teens, the parents, the grandparents, and the great-grandparents. They're all coming in. My practice is a 4G practice. My practice was designed, when we do a staff meeting and we talk about our mission is that our message is relevant to all 4 generations for every person that walks in the door. Today we saw a 2-week-old and a 3-month-old as new patients. And when we came in, before that parent had left, they knew that their responsibility was for themselves, their spouses, their siblings of that child, their parents, and their grandparents to be checked for a chiropractic opportunity. Because that's the belief system that you will live a longer, healthier, and happier life without nerve interference. And it's that, I know we're talking about the ease of practice. This is what we believe in, and this is what we deliver. So the 4th version, so that was version 3.0, which is brain-based care. The 4th version is what we call greatness. And truthfully, we don't know what that means. Is that somewhere when you put a great model together, you have to keep a placeholder for what's next. I have a feeling that chiropractic is going to go and find its path to be really one of those remarkable human potential movements where people will come to seek with us not only the ability to have a physical dimensional healing, but to have a complete healing of where they're ascending into a much, much more dynamic state of creativity and the ability to be there. Now, who wouldn't want their kid adjusted? You know, I was adjusted my entire life so that I didn't have asthma, so that I didn't have sore joints, until I started to realize that my role as a chiropractor was to take it to that human potential or category 4 level. So I throw that out to the listening group to think, where does greatness take you? Where does the message of greatness leave you thinking about where chiropractic can be? Let me back up a moment, because maybe we should say to the same group, listen, if it's fantastic just to get out of a symptom-based practice, how would you like to transition the practice you're in maybe to go from version 1 to version 2? How would you like to learn about going to version 3? And Caleb, do you know what the commonality between all 4 of those great versions will be? And perhaps even the 5th version, which is 0-0. It's the functioning nervous system. It's the nervous system that has the ability to project itself into the health of that person and the ability of that person to perceive themselves in their environment. And what we know is that if we can have a remarkable way of assessing these functioning nervous systems that's practical, easy, and capable, then we've got the battle, half the battle taken care of, because that's the certainty we started with. So when we started doing, oh, good, we're still live. When we started doing much of the, you're still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, perfect, you just changed over. So listen, when we started, you go ahead, please.
I was trying to, if I had any background noise, I didn't want it to switch over to my camera and take away from you.
You were great. No, you took away. It's all perfect. But listen, what we were talking about was just briefly the idea of making this easier and sort of taking this glorious message that I've been sort of postulating on and saying, well, how do you make it practical? Now, I lead the team that's called Chiropractic Leadership Alliance, and one of the ways that I was taught to build this great message into my practice was to scan the nervous system. And I think, you know, Caleb, when you're in practice, you scan to the nervous system. When in your clinical practice, you guys scan to the nervous system. I think many of the listeners out here know when I use the word scanning that we're talking about using different sensors to detect where there's this nerve interference, this nerve disturbance going on. So again, it's like anything else. It depends what lens you look at the world through. But if you're taught subluxation, you can take sensors like an EMG and not necessarily look for where there's tight muscles. When you use an EMG and you're understanding the principles of the subluxated person, you start to see energy distribution. You don't start to see a tight quadratus lumborum or a sacrospinalis. You start to see that the microcurrent that's firing to manage the body against gravity is being constantly overused. And as a result of that, we start to pick up aberrations, and those show up as colors or overages within the expenditure. And we start to then take a look and say, oh my gosh, instead of saying, do you have a sore back, which might be version 0-0, we start to say, wow, you know, because your spine isn't working in harmony with the way the nervous system is working, you know, you're starting to manifest a lot of fatigue in your life. It's exhausting to be out of balance. It's exhausting to be disorganized at the spinal level. Now, at the same time as you're looking at that EMG scan and you're operating in version 2.0, you could say, well, did you know that besides the fact that your posture could cause a lot of wasting of this energy, that when you are constantly stressing your body with too many toxins like sugar or behavioral issues or, you know, anxiety, that your body has to react as well, and that's going to cost you energy. And if you use that same scan and you were using it in a version 3.0 version, you could say to that same patient, I don't know if you know this, but the health of your brain depends on how well your input of signals is back to the brain itself. And I don't know if you know this, but your brain actually acts very much like one of those self-winding watches. Let's hope it's Rolex. And what we know is that as you have better input and better movement from the spinal column, then this nurtures and nourishes the healing of your brain. In fact, it can keep your brain functioning at a high level for your entire life. So you can see how you can take a sensor reading and put it into the different categories of version 1, version 00, version 1, version 2, and version 3. You can do the same with a thermal scan. And the thermal scan is detecting the preganglionic to the postganglionic sympathetic motor controls. And this means that when the subluxation has embedded itself deeper into the controlling mechanism and it's gone through the layer of the muscle tone, that now you're starting to see this deepening reaction that means that the body can no longer regulate temperature in these different regions. And we start to see the clumping of these different reactions, the ganglia being affiliated now, you start to say, oh my gosh, you know what? The end organ is now underperforming. And this means that we can now say that from a spinal wellness version, that there's no doubt that you're feeling, you could be feeling spinal change, but there's a big story you need to hear. And you can do the same with the wellness. You can say, well, the toxicity in your diet is showing up and it's affecting the way your nervous system is organizing. And you can see how that goes. And then we take the jewel of it all, which is heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is the gold standard in cardiology and in exercise physiology. I'm a fellow in sports sciences, and we used it years ago to look at overtraining and performance. And we can start to see that HRV is the jewel that talks about adaptability. What better word for chiropractic? And so the adaptability of that person is affected by their subluxated state, affected by their external stresses that come in. And as a result of that, what we know is that when we do HRV, and by the way, you can do HRV on newborns. You can do HRV on, there's great studies that talk about it. We're coming up with a version of HRV that's going to have an ear clip so that newborns, well, at least infants, can have their HRV done versus using what we use, which is handheld. We have fabulous equipment for testing and sensing these things. But the HRV, when added to the thermal, when added to the EMG, blended together to say we can create what's called a neural efficiency index. It's the perfect reporting tool for a chiropractor because with HRV, you're looking at the global sense that the person has been living with stress from internal or external sources. And we then apply the spine to the nervous system testing with the EMG and the thermal. And we have a proprietary weighting system that weights the percentages of what percentage of the signal weighting goes to HRV, thermal, and EMG. And as a result of that, we create this incredible single number scoring system, which has taken over. We have thousands of doctors doing this. And the report is very simply this, is that this number out of 100 represents how efficient and healthy your nervous system is performing with the stresses you put under it. And as a result of that, the closer to 100 you are, the healthier you will be. When you are in these zones of 50, 60s, and 70s, you're under our intensive care model. When you're over the 70 and getting closer to 80, it means that your body is healing and we can begin to work with you on a more partnershiping model, meaning that we can begin to say, are you ready to have less frequent care? Are you ready to do more on your side of the equation? So you can see chiropractic is moving away from being this semi-religious model of care. And I don't mean religious in any form of negativity way. I'm saying that we take it and put the intensity of this intention of healing into it, where it's not some distant hope and wish that it happens. It's a reality. It's a reality because we believe in universal intelligence being a constructive and destructive force in its balance. And we understand that innate intelligence allows the body to reorganize itself to the optimum performance level if there is clear communication throughout this neural array. And that's the big if. So if you arm yourself with the tools of these remarkable sensors, and you have the right lens through which you can look at chiropractic, and you have the right report that allows you to have this concise but controlled mechanism, then patients flock in. Hundreds of patients flock in every week into your office. And that's a reality. So if it sounds like I'm preaching from the pulpit, I am, because I see it every day in my practice, and I see it every day in the practices of those people that we get involved in this technology. So Caleb, I'm gonna say that I've probably shouted off a lot at some folks, and we're sort of taking it into the bottom and up to the next side of the hour. Does this forum allow us to have interaction with our clients, with the people on the call, or is it strictly a monologue on my part?
Say that one more time.
Can people on the call ask questions or make comment to us?
They can. However, the Q&A, let me look at it. I'm opening it right now. Let's see. It says, the feature is disabled, so maybe we can have a post question and answer session.
Perfect.
Via the Facebook event group or something like that.
Sure. Well, why don't we do that, especially on the Facebook group, because I know that that's where many of the people, stay connected to this summit. And I just want to offer a couple of things to that. Obviously, I'm going to be participating in any questions that come in associated with this, and feel free to connect with that. For those of you who are Insight users, in other words, if you have a clinical relationship or a ongoing client relationship with CLA, we also have an Insight, and Caleb, that's one of the things that you're welcome to join in too, because for those of you who are students who are on here, we want you participating and learning more about the Insight scanning. We have an Insight Facebook page. It's by invitation, so if you send a request, we can continuously say yes to that. We'd be delighted to. I'll be participating, but I want you to also know that if you're interested in getting information from myself or from CLA in terms of learning more about the technologies that I described there, you can contact info@subluxation.com. And as I so sillily always say, if I need to spell the word subluxation for you, then we're probably on the wrong call here. But the truth is, and I don't want to sound crazy with that. We want to be very invitational to everybody, and when I mean we, I don't mean CLA. I mean the message of the leadership of chiropractic. Listen, whether you're operating in version 0.0 or right down to what your version of 4.0 is, there's a way in which we can build a better profession. This is not about trying to, as Larry Markson, the great friend of ours, always said it best. He said, chiropractic is the only profession that circles the wagons and fires in. So often what we do is that we miss the opportunity to build a great profession by trying to pick apart each other. Now, every profession has that. I'm not naive, but we want you as youthful leaders, as those of you who are on here who are jumping into this great profession, to accept the responsibility that chiropractic has this uniqueness. And the uniqueness is that we have developed remarkable ways in which we can speak to people about their human health and potential without driving them down the drug-based model, that we can speak to families about the opportunity to raise children without the interferences of drug-based interventions being the priority. We can focus on families and children having everything from their symptom-based care that are associated with entry points. I mean, those babies that I said coming in, the first baby had, if you can believe it, a birth-based torticollis, and was associated with being checked in my world. And just so you know, that mother, before she was here, she was the baby was turned in my office using the Webster technique. Larry Webster and I used to do a dog and pony show. I used to travel around the country with Larry, doing the Webster technique with him. So I've been on the pediatric bandwagon for a very, very long time. And the second baby that came in had was colicky and was having a lot of difficulty. So whatever the entry point is, it might be symptom based, and that's what I was getting at. It leads to those different versions, and it gives you the opportunity to do it. And that's where the growth of chiropractic will be, is not about this sense that, well, I'm a pediatric chiropractor and I don't look at symptoms. No, we take them all and we move them up in the world. And that's the joy of being in chiropractic. And if you have the skills, to be able to detect a subluxation, if you have the skills and the technologies to ensure that you're clearing those subluxations and you have the ability to communicate, then you have the opportunity, as I said, to develop at the beginning of this new level of certainty. And as I said before, you get paid to the level at which you operate with certainty. If you go into the version 4.0 model, let's go back to the version 3.0 model, which is brain-based wellness, you get paid as a neurofunctional specialist. And you know, my great friend Yannick Polly, who is a chiropractor through and through, he detects the subluxations and clears them, and he practices in Lausanne, Switzerland. You can't come in to see him for a brain-based assessment until October, because he's booked fully between now and October. And that's why he was over here. He said, I have to train more people. And you know, I think that anybody who might be listening to this who is in our program recognize that this is not about going and becoming a Carrick devotee or otherwise. When you adjust people and you know how to detect and you know how to take a little bit deeper look, and you know, you understand the diascetic foci between the vermis, and you take a look at the prefrontal cortex, and you understand the connectivity between that, it still all boils down to how you adjust to the spinal neurofunctional level, and how you then take it and move the people into doing these canalizations within the nervous system, which we call time and repetition, which engage neuroplasticity. So when we start talking about the power of the adjustment and going into brain-based care, this is where the future of chiropractic lies. But it really always comes back to the very base that chiropractic was founded on, and that is that you will live a longer, healthier, and happier life if you have a subluxation-free nervous system. And I think that might be just one of the perfect places to leave it at.
Absolutely. The technology sounds amazing. Being able to measure your progress, the patient care is totally, like, how can you not be certain when they can see it right there in front of them?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. When Dr. Gentempo and Dr. Kent, who are two of my great mentors and friends, when they put this, and by the way, their vision of putting technology in the hands of chiropractors literally changed a generation of chiropractic and for generations to come. They brought the principle of a subluxated nervous system to light and to life when you could look at scans. And the message that was back then, and I was one of the originators of that message as we were developing it. I was always the clinical advisor and the trainer of people to understand the interpretation of the scans. But even back then, we were still trying to make it right. You know, that there was this almost version 1.0 that we talk about. The language of communication now and the enhancement of using that core score, which is the weighted version of putting those three together, has literally transformed the practices around the world. CLA is the de facto leader in those technology groupings, unparalleled within the world. We sell into 40 different countries, and so I'm saying that because we have a relevance to chiropractors worldwide. And the reason we do that is validated, reliable technology, evidence-centered care, evidence-based outcomes. This is the catchphrase of what's going to drive people into it. But we have thousands of doctors using the core score right now. And what we now have is that we have a data pool that has been collected, because we serve the core score into the cloud. We've captured over 250,000, and it's probably closer to 350,000 by now, core scores pre and post on people. That means that we hold the greatest amount of clinical data related to what we were just talking about in terms of clinical outcome. And when we start taking the next step, which is to look at scaling that data, analyzing it, so that we start to see the power of the adjustments, but not only that, the power of the care plans that people are under, the frequency of care, the demographics of the person, their entry strategies that go along. You can see the chiropractic is now entering into the next version of what life will be. And maybe that's the greatest version.
Yeah, so in your office, you have this technology, and the profession as a whole even has this technology to use. Even if you're not even using the technology in your office, it's there that for everyone to see.
Yes. Yeah. And listen, as I said, we've streamlined it. It's like any other technology. We've streamlined it so that the entry point, the cost point to get into it is fractional compared to what it used to be when it first came out. And so we've made it's designed, like all other technology, to be harnessed so that you can use it to the advantage. And sure, we want you building great practices, telling great stories, but we want you to change the world with it as well. And I know that's a bit bold, but this is where it goes, because the supremacy of the nervous system is where the story of chiropractic needs to reside.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I've learned a ton. I hope everyone else has as well. Do you have anything to say before we take a leave?
No, just that thank you again for inviting me into this wonderful forum. It's exhilarating to have a chance. We met at the Berkshires, and you know, this was an event that was talking to the subluxation-centered crowd, and it's exhilarating to see the youth of the profession coming up and embracing just what we talked about here. This is not where you have to kind of, you know, well, let me put it this way. When Reggie came to my school, I'm a CMCC grad, when Reggie came to my school back in the late 70s, which is when I graduated in 1980, so late 70s I was in school, Reggie wasn't allowed on campus because he was a little too out there. But there was myself, Gilles Marsh, the Hinwoods, then we went to Reggie, and he changed our vision of who we were. And for that, 35 years later, I'm extremely happy to be sitting here and telling that story. The other side of that equation is you didn't have to hide from that. These events like the Berkshires, being a member of IFCO, working with the ASRF, the Australian Spinal Research Foundation, working through the clinics at Life, working through the clinics in Sherman, in New Zealand, in Life West. These are the genius schools that are allowed, and Parker and to some degree Palmer. These are the genius schools that are graduating chiropractors again. So it's exhilarating for me to have seen that the sine wave of the chiropractic profession is now at the apex instead of at the trough.
Yeah, we're definitely looking up to a new wave of certainty and technology and results and
Sure.
growing profession. And I thank you so much for letting us learn from you today.
Sure.
I hope everybody had a good time and learned a lot. And we will talk to you soon. We have a couple of more webcasts coming up over the next few weeks. Tune in to see when and where they are.
Sure,
subluxation.com.
Yeah, subluxation.com when you want to learn more.
Subluxation.com. Have a good night. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.